Bones.
What up? Welcome back once again to the Necro Zoo. I am Bones.
Oh, yeah.
And in this one, let's go ahead and add one more figure to my McFarlane DC Multiverse collection. Now, today we will take a look at Icon. Now, this is a character originally from Milestone Comics. Now, as a youngster, I do remember this comic coming out. I actively collected it for a while, but it did eventually lose a little bit of steam for me, having to do with the whole backstory and the direction in which they took the Icon character. Now, I did enjoy some of the other titles in Milestone Comics, like Hardware and the original version of Static Shock when he was just known as Static. But we'll get into that a little bit more as we go into this release. Now, have been waiting for this for, I think, more than 20 years. Always wanted an officially released Icon figure. So, I will talk about my disappointments and I'll talk about the things I enjoyed, but he does look pretty heroic in the packaging. But let's go ahead and take a closer look at him. But first, he does come with your standard black DC Multiverse stand. Now, of course, these are not really needed, but sometimes they do come in useful. He also comes with his Datafall card. On the front, you have some very nice source material from the comics. Of course, this is when he was already in the DC universe. But that original Milestone artwork for Icon and Rocket, I think it was Bright. I think he was the artist. Of course, created by and imagined by Dwayne Duffy, RIP, one of the awesome creators of the whole Milestone universe. But that original artwork is just what I always remember about Icon and Rocket, as well as the rest of the characters. Now, the artwork here being more of a modern take on Icon, they did redo the costume, and I think they tried to make it a little bit more superhero-y, where the original Milestone design had a lot of texture and feel. This was a more streamlined costume. On the back, you do have some information. Now, from what I remember, what I know, he's an alien trapped or deciding to live in a human form. He goes by Augustus Freeman, I'm pretty sure. Don't remember really the alien race, but he's a part of an alien race. But I think his original name is Arnis or something like that. Now, we will talk about that original Milestone costume design later on. He does come with some alternate hands, some open, not really flying hands, but kind of gesturing hands or emoting hands, which I do enjoy. They kind of do work with this character because if you look up images of Icon, they never really show him flying with like Superman styled flying hands. So I think these really worked with him. Now, I did make him some alternate hands, and I did find some perfect flying hands that fit perfectly without any modding or painting. But I'll show you guys those later on. We'll hold on to these. Now let's go ahead and take a closer, more detailed look at the figure. Now, once again, I'm not super disappointed in the figure. He does, for the most part, retain the look of the costume in the more modern era. But the one thing that is a little disappointing, which a lot of people have pointed out, is that there is no sculpting added onto here. In fact, they removed sculpting. They took out the belt to give him a more streamlined look and to match up more with the source material. Because, of course, this is the Earth 2 Superman book. We just finished taking a look at the Fleischer Superman. And this is that same body. There's a couple of takeaways for me on this. I mean, they didn't add the sculpture of the bands, the golden bands that he has around his thighs and the arms. And of course, I think in the comic, the top part of the costume is a more simplified superhero costume and colors, but the bands would have been a nice addition. So that does kind of make a difference. But for first impressions, as I said before, been waiting for years for an icon figure. So I'm not too disappointed because just to have one of these in hand is really awesome. And after such a long wait, it does feel great to have a physical, official release of Icon. Now, I do have a plan for this. What I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to buy another one of these and I'm just going to hold on to it. And although I think I have it in my mind that I think McFarlane's going to make maybe a 2-pack with Icon and Rocket, and he'll either redo the color scheme to make it like the original costume design, or he just might add a little bit of sculpting, fingers crossed. But if that never happens, I'm going to buy an extra one of these so that I can customize it and make it more like the original Milestone costume design. So that is my backup plan in case McFarlane never releases another version of Icon. Now, let's take a look at the head sculpt. This is one of the things that I'm really happy about. Perfect head sculpt, really looks good. Now, what would have really been sweet is if they would have made him with the face plates like the way they did Mr. Terrific. That way we could have had, a yelling, screaming face. Just more options for the head sculpt, but I'm not complaining. This icon head is really good. They get the whole feel, the whole sternness of the icon character. Love the yellowed out eyes. That's something I'm a big fan of, is when figures have those, opaque eyes or like a white or like in this case yellow. It does have a little bit of paint in the iris to give off a kind of like if it's energy glowing in there. So really nice head sculpt. Love the skin tone. Love the sculpt. That's one thing I'm really happy about. Take a look at the articulation now. Looks down pretty well, not too good. And he can't look up really high. Now, if you heat this up, you could get a little bit more movement out of it. But I'm going to go ahead and mod it and I'll show it to you guys later on. Now, taking a look at the upper torso, you have the lines for the costume design. We've talked about that. A little stiff on the body. I mean, he does have some side to side. Not really too much forward crunch, but you can move him around and get him in some pretty nice poses. Once again, Icon isn't really, like Nightwing. He doesn't have to do, the splits or any kind of contortionist poses. But I'll just go ahead and mod it to show you guys the more range you can get. You have the articulation in the shoulders, which is always cool. I love that you can put the shoulders forward and pose them like that, or you can lean the shoulders back and give them like that broad chested, superhero stance. So that's always really nice. Legs, same thing. You got the twist at the hip, double jointed knees, straighten them out, rocker. Pretty standard from McFarlane. So you do have pretty generous articulation with these figures. I don't know why people keep going back to that same narrative that McFarlane makes statues. This is not a statue. You can get him in different poses, crouching down, flying. I'll show you guys some pics that I did with him. So that is just a falsehood. And this is a pretty nice release. The simplicity isn't really a bad thing. It's a clean figure. It's just like I said, a little bit of sculpting would have gone a long way. But what this reminds me of is that when McFarlane first started making figures, people would complain about the added texture and the added sculpt work. And they would say, oh, we just want the same body book over and over. Just paint the details like Marvel Legends style. Well, now we've gotten to where sometimes that's the route that McFarlane goes.
You freaking freaks! When will you learn? When will you learn that your actions have consequences?
So I mean, really, you did it to yourselves, and sometimes we get a figure that has minimal sculpt work, but sometimes we do get figures that have that classic McFarlane added texture and design. Now, the cape is another thing I wanted to talk about. A lot of people say that this material is really flimsy and the shine on it is kind of bad. Now, it doesn't bother me at all. I mean, what I do enjoy about it is all the articulation, all the ways you can pose him. That is like an added fun factor that I really enjoy. So I'm not too worried about the material it's made out of. I know it can get damaged really easily. I've never talked about this, but I do a trick when I pull out a figure out of the blister pack. And what I usually do is I cut off all of the ties and then I split it down the top right to about above the head, and then I just pull it apart. And when you pull it apart, you break open that hole, and the figure just comes right out, and you don't have to pull the cape through the hole, which could really damage the cape and scratch it up, especially one that comes with this style of material. But I love the cape, it adds so much character and options in posing them that it's just something I cannot complain about. Now, let's go ahead and look at the modding I did right away. I did pop up the head and I made that little divot in the back of the neck porthole. I've shown this before. Another thing I did is I put a longer neck peg. Now, it's not even very long. It was like a millimeter longer. But what this does now, as you could see from when I first did the articulation, he looks down all the way. It even makes it to where you can almost see a gap in the back of the neck where before it was like so pushed down on the neck that you couldn't even make his chin touch, the top of his chest. And another added feature with that cutout that I did is he looks way up. So, of course, this is great for flying poses and getting a lot more out of figure photography and display. So, that's the head mod I went ahead and did. Lifted up the head a little bit and made that little cut in the back where he can raise his head up. Then I did the mod between the chest and the abdomen where you pull off the upper body, cut out all the inside, and then make the same kind of little cut, but this time in front. And what that does is gives you a lot more smoother range. You can see now that when you articulate the waist, it actually touches the top of the trunks from side to side, the whole tilt-a-whirl, a more generous crunch, which is always appreciated, and it even loosened up the lower waist swivel. So that just adds a lot more when you're talking about, how you can articulate them and get them in poses. So pretty easy little mods that just add that extra touch. Now, I did make some alternate hands for him. I found this hand. This is one of the hands from Wave Rider. I just painted it black, but it fits really well with his body size. And it's just like a pointing, you know, coming at you hand, which really works with this icon figure. So I was really happy with this one. And if you want to add some quick flying hands that you don't want to mod or paint, get the hands from Animal Man. These are shaped in flying hands, and the portholes fit onto the pegs of this figure. And you don't need to mod them. These flying hands fit right onto the peg. I just think they're a little bit small, but you can add them and it'll give you an alternate hand to get them in a flying pose. So that's pretty cool. Right? So that is the icon figure. Not gonna blow you away, but if you're a really big fan of Milestone like I am, and a really big fan of Icon, this is just something that I never thought I would have, and it's really great to finally have it. Now I do want to bring out my custom DC Universe Classic styled Icon figure. Now I've had this for years. When I figured out that Mattel was never going to release an Icon figure, I made this one on my own. Now you got to kind of take it easy on me a little bit, because when I did this, I had pretty much never done a lot of customizing. So this was just something I did and cobbled together on my own. I was always proud of it and I always displayed it, in my collection. I added all of that extra, the bands and the ring on his chest, everything that would make it look like the way he did in the comics. And even if you look online, you can see a lot of Icon customs that are really nice to look at. Hopefully in the future, McFarlane will give us, something more akin to this design of the Icon character. So always a gem in my collection, even though it was one of my first custom jobs. And another one I did later on down the line when I had a little bit more experience, but my custom skills were still in their infancy, is I went ahead and made a custom Static figure. Now, of course, when Static Shock debuted in Milestone, he was only known as Static. He wasn't known as Static Shock. This is the design of the character that I've always liked more than when he, got that trench coat and the goggles. I was just never a big fan of that. I'm more old school, so I really liked this older design and version of Static. Got it down pretty close the way he looked in the comics. You can even flip his hat around and have his hat on backwards, add an electrical effect, and even add his manhole cover that he would ride on. So another one that I'm pretty proud of, especially since it was, when I first started customizing. And I know they made a DC Icons Static figure that's based on this design. But the thing about that is that those figures are like 4 inches tall. So if you were to put that next to this new 7-inch McFarlane Icon, it would look very miniature. I think that DC Direct Static would have worked with my custom DC Universe Classics Icon, but I just never got around to getting it. But I do like the way my custom scales with this icon from McFarlane. So happy to have this one, this custom Static, but hopefully McFarlane ends up giving us a Static figure with this design. And if he doesn't, I always have my custom. So anyways, guys, I'm pretty happy with this. It's not perfect. It's not, I'm not going to say it's everything I imagined, but it does give me a base if I ever want to try and emulate this costume design on this McFarlane 7-inch body. So hopefully McFarlane comes through and I don't have to do that. But in the future, if I ever have to, I'll go ahead and try and make a custom Icon figure. But anyways, you guys keep hunting out there, keep collecting, keep customizing, and I will see you on the next one.
They used to call me Crazy Joe, but now they can call me Batman.